Okay, thank you for bearing with us through some technical difficulties. I'm going to ask everyone now to get seated. There's a chair here, there's a chair there, there's a chair over there. I see some back there. If you're currently standing, I'm going to assume that you're comfortable standing for the duration of the talk and I don't need to find you a chair. If you are not comfortable standing, please get seated into a chair so that I can get more chairs if people need more chairs. Okay. So we have a talk that I think a lot of you are excited about, seeing as how much turnout that we got. Pascal is going to tell us about AI safety in healthcare. But just a little introduction into Trajectory Labs, because I think there's a lot of new faces tonight. So Trajectory Labs is an AI safety nonprofit. We offer like 9-to-5 co-working space for researchers independent from us who are working on AI safety. This covers both technical and policy research, as well as some kind of in-between, hard-to-classify stuff. We also put on events like this, as well as discussion groups. We also offer kind of like a community for people who are interested in finding or creating new AI safety opportunities local to Toronto. So if that sounds like something that might be interesting to you, please come talk to me after. Especially if you are someone who is interested in getting into technical safety over the summer. I'm going to get Julian at the back to wave. If you're interested in getting into technical AI safety over the summer, Julian and some of his fellows are running a kind of more intensive program. If you're generally just interested in AI safety, please come talk to me later and see if there are any opportunities that I can connect you with, or if there's anything you might know about that people around the office might like. Okay, so that is my spiel about Trajectory Labs. A couple housekeeping notes. Washrooms are to the outside, and then to the right. You don't need a pin to get in and out. Try not to be too loud during the presentation. Turn off your phones, do all that basic etiquette stuff. Noise carries, it's kind of like an open concept hall, so if you have to have a call or something, please like go out these doors and go as far as you can. Do not go this way and try to take a call. We will all hear you. Okay, I think that's just about everything. One last housekeeping rules. If you're here normally, you'll know we do Slido. So that's like a Q&A where you scan and you submit the questions. Pascal has bravely opted to take all your questions without the Slido intermediary. So if you have a question, we're going to try to save as many as possible for the end. But if you have like a really dire question, feel free to raise your hands. Please do wait for me to run up with the audience mic. That way people on our stream can hear you and everyone here can hear your lovely voice. And a good rule of thumb, if you're going to ask a question that's going to be really, really long, you can save it to afterwards where we're all hanging out and talking. If you're going to ask a question that's not really a question, it's like a personal polemic, please also save that to afterwards. Okay, I think that is everything. Without further ado, here is Pascal.
Thank you, Georgia. Don't make me regret the question thing, or else Georgia will hold me accountable for it. All right, so I'll try to speed run. We're a bit behind. For people, great. All right. For people online, all the delays were to make sure you can see the slide. So hopefully, you guys appreciate it. I'm gonna try to speed run as much as possible through some of those. So these are some of my work experience. I work at Medtronic, which is a giant medical technology company. Medicat that does EMR for US campuses. CanImmunize that handle the vaccine rollout for a few provinces across Canada. And I was associate director of the Center for Health Law, Policy and Ethics. I'm adjunct law prof at the Faculty of Law of FU Ottawa. You can assume that I was lawyer at more or less all of those. So I wanted to start by framing where we're going today. So I put a bit of as a walking like towards the peak of a mountain. The talk is mostly going to be about 3 and 4. So we can reach a summit and talk about governance of AI in healthcare, hopefully for the most part during the Q&A. But I think it's very, very important to understand what are medical technology first, why is AI included within a subset of that, what are the current regulation, and what are the future way where we can be regulating that, and especially the US is gonna start to regulate that in different ways. So what can be considered medical technology? It's a little bit of everything, right? It can be your Apple Watch, it can be EMR like Epic or Cerner, pacemaker, insulin pump, even lab equipment like micropipette, dishes, media inside the dishes. Here, if we look at like some medical device, it can be a deep brain neurostimulator, again, like cardiac defibrillator. It's a lot of things. Uh, Again, here you can see some pacemaker, including a very, very small one that we got licensed for sale when I was at Medtronic called Micra that goes through a vein of your leg directly into your heart. It's the size of my pinky. Um, Another one is something called a pill cam, which you swallow and it's recording going down all the way into your body instead of doing a colonoscopy. So, of course, colonoscopy are not the nicest exam to go through. So that's another way of doing that. Of course, you can think of the Neuralink implant. We are one of the site here in Toronto. Most people don't really know that, but one of the site where we are starting to do studies with Dr. Lozano's and his team. They are using robotics there and putting the chip. If, for those who never heard of it, amazing videos on YouTube and whatnot on that. Also, software as medical device. Again, this is where we're getting into AI. AI is falling under that bucket. So a software application is a software as a medical device. If there's a medical purpose for patient, it's software and is not a hardware, or else it would be a software in a medical device. Current regulation. So when we look at Canada, we have three class of device here. So we have class 1 that are Band-Aid. You don't really need a license for that. Class 2 that are needle. Class 3 that are something like insulin pump. And then class 4 that are pacemaker. When we look at the FDA, they have a very similar approach. They have class 1, class 2, class 3. Again, low, moderate, high risk. The way most things get approved in the US, and I cannot stress that enough, is through a 510K. If you are developing medical technology in Canada, in the US, right around the world, usually people will try to get it through a 510K because they don't clear it. They look and see if your technology is mostly similar to something that they have already approved, and then they put you in the market. It is not something that we have in Canada. It is something that is very specific to the US and reducing by a lot the burden of going through the process. You can see here it's 3 to 6 months, while normally if you do a de novo request, 9 to 12, and a PMA, that is most of them, would be a year to 2 timeline. Again, 510K, it's 98% of the device that are getting on market in the US. You only have to show that it's potentially equivalent. You don't have to show safety. You don't have to show efficacy. Of course, most AI and ML software, not necessarily healthcare, so not regulated by the FDA. And even if you do have something up and you're breaking the law here, and it's even more of the case in Canada and the US, there is very little enforcement. Again, as I was saying, in Canada, we don't have an equivalent, but we have something called special access that could allow you to bypass regulatory approval if your doctor deemed that there's nothing else on the market that could solve your issue, whether it's a drug or a device. So over time, I can see those draft guidance here that are from 2011. There's this framework here from 2012, even more 2013, 2016, some more guidance. You can assume here very, very similar for Canada. Around 2018, 2019, we started to see a lot more collaboration between Canada, the UK, and the US. And you can see here in June 2024, some more information about transparency for machine learning, enable medical device, some guiding principle. I put here in a box that like some kind of information, like this guidance document is for information, right? This is not binding, this is not law. This is how the industry has gotten most of its information for the past few decades. And then we get to the election of Trump for a second time, and here's what we get. They remove most things. You cannot even find it on the FDA website. They fully remove them. So now we're in a bit of a regulatory vacuum in a lot of ways. I'm sure most of you will have heard of DOJ. They fired a bunch of people. They let go expert. They gutted the FDA. A lot of like expert in AI scientists that are left. And that at the moment where we're seeing a surge of authorization for AI devices. I was looking earlier today with 1,357 that have been approved by the FDA. And the new FDA commissioner said that like he want to relax the oversight, you want to have recommendation, and the U.S. on December 11 passed an executive order to preempt the state from passing laws. Because what has happened is some of the states started to put laws around AI, laws around chatbot, laws around preventing certain things. You can see here in some of the states, Utah and Texas, a bit of a sandbox approach. We'll touch on that a bit later. California banned AI from implying licensure, so saying that they can treat or that they can diagnose. Colorado requests all kind of things. And then when we look at Canada, we are proposing, like very newly, some regulatory sandboxes. So maybe closer to what Utah is doing. And the AI Union is looking at that being higher risk for medical AI. So you can see we went from a collaboration for decades to now a global divergence, right? The Europe is doing its own thing. The US is doing their own thing, which is aggressively allowing those to come on the market. And Canada is trying to find its place a little bit in there by trying to focus on interoperability and some high impact classification. The Connected Care for Canadian was just reintroduced in February 2026, but that would only apply to provinces and territories that do not have requirements that are substantially similar, which means that we may end up with a patchwork in Canada as well. So what is the lay of the land in Canada for now? It's very, very challenging, like including like AI software used to treat or prevent and diagnose. We rely heavily on risk assessment from the vendor. There's gap in regulation. If some of you have heard of innovation at Unity Health or SickKit or some of those, the only reason that those are happening is because the innovator are inside the hospital. The doctors, the administrator, again, given that it's coming from inside the hospital, it is outside of the jurisdiction of Health Canada. So they can build it there, they can scale it there, but they are unable to sell it to other hospitals, right? So again, it's great for Unity, it's great for SickKids, but not so great for the rest of Canada and people over there. And all of that is because of lack of a feasible path to put those innovation to market. So what have tech companies done because of that? Because that's not just a Canadian problem, it's a US problem. They went direct to consumer, right? We look at a Fitbit, we look at an Oura Ring, we look at an Apple Watch. All of those give you a ton of information about your health, right? We'll come back a bit later on for the US, but like I want to give you a few examples of like what the industry did. And it's also very much informing the approach of how the two big AI labs are approaching healthcare, which is OpenAI and Anthropic. They're taking a very different approach with the ChatGPT Health and Anthropic for healthcare. Again, you look at Oura here, at some point you're saying that you can probably track your menstrual cycle with that. You're saying you could detect COVID ahead of time. During the NBA bubble, every single player had to wear an Oura Ring to see if they would get sick ahead of time. And as I was mentioning, I will speed around to some of those. But it's not a new problem, right? So here you see article from 2014, 2015 from Scott Gottlieb, who ended up being the FDA commissioner between 2017 and 2019. And nothing changed, really, right? He spent most of this time going after Juul for kids vaping, and we're still in the same place. So I just want to touch quickly on like a bit of enforcement. So when we look at enforcement, what that looks like. So here we have a Whoop, which is kind of like a Fitbit or a mix of a Apple Watch in some ways. You could argue that like they fly a bit too close to the sun with like one of their feature that they had in there, where the FDA sent them a warning letter saying that the blood pressure inside would fall under something that is technically diagnosing, so that they needed to go through approval. While on the other side, you have Apple, who again went with a much, much smaller claim here, which they just send you notification about potential hypertension, and who did get cleared by the FDA and did get clearance by Health Canada before bringing it to the market, which large validation studies. Now on emerging innovation. So a couple of weeks ago, some of you might have seen that the Canadian Medical Association published the result of their survey, where 80% of the respondents said they go online for health information. Most of them said it was because it's quicker. 57% said that they went online because they can access a family doctor or healthcare. Just as all of you guys raising your hand, who has a family doctor here? It's pretty good. Looks like half. So it's pretty decent. And one of the physicians there is starting to say, he start to see patient coming in, they're like, I put my symptoms in ChatGPT, he told me I had cancer, and people are freaking out and having all of those kind of issues in there, right? And then January, I'd say was biggest month in AI for healthcare. On January 7, ChatGPT, OpenAI launched ChatGPT Health, which they are releasing a dedicated HIPAA already. So HIPAA is a privacy law in the US for health. They're integrating with EHR that has a lot of patients, and you can just use it the way you use the ChatGPT. Cloud for healthcare, very different, right? They are, as they do with coding, targeting enterprise. They are building enterprise-grade connector to databases, to studies, and helping on the administrative front, for example, to reduce chart reviews. And of course, you have XAI and Elon that say, just put your stuff in there and it's going to be better than your doctor. If we go back again on the two front here, which is OpenAI and Anthropic, you see OpenAI, they took the road of Whoop, right? They took the road of like the Apple Watch. They took the road of Fitbit. Let's go direct to consumer. People are going to use that. While Anthropic is being a bit more, showing a bit more restraint, being like, we'll partner with healthcare provider, we'll partner with insurance company, and we're going to build things for enterprise in there. What is missing in that is probably the biggest story would happen the day before the OpenAI announcement, which is Utah announced that they were partnering with a company called Doctronic, and that they were going to have AI automated prescribing of medication. So the way they're doing it, and they benchmarked it as the AI prescribing the same thing as the doctor 99.2% of the time, is that if you do a renewal of medication, which a bunch of medication being excluded, of course, narcotics and things like that, you can just go into AI, I think it's $8, and it's prescribing it to you. And then the pharmacist, just like if your doctor had prescribed it to you, will review it and give you the medication. Again, the way you see it is like patient are just asking in the interface. It can renew 190 plus chronic meds. It's either giving you the renewal or escalating for human review. A very, very interesting point in that is that they were able to get medical liability and something goes wrong, it's for prescribing medication, and then you have an adverse event. They have insurance and you can sue them, which arguably might be better than suing a doctor, especially in Canada, which is almost impossible to win those lawsuits. Going back to the explosion of clinical care here. As I mentioned earlier, 1,357 FDA clear tool. When OpenAI launched ChatGPT for healthcare, they said they had 200 million weekly health queries. This for sure is higher now. And when you look at the FDA clear tool, here you see it like less than 50% had clinical performance studies and less than 33% provided sex-specific safety data, which of course highly problematic once you have that and people use them. Some success story here. We'll go quickly through some of those, but in the UK they set up some hospital with the AI detection for stroke. That was extremely beneficial, 100% increase at the AI enabled site, and the doctor have been pressing the government there to launch that all across the UK after that study. Here are some studies around with O1 Preview. For those of you who don't follow the model launch very often, O1 Preview was launched in September 2024. Now we're at GPT 5.2, let's use in Codex. So O1 Preview and O1 constantly outperform or we're at the level of physician across several reasoning evaluation. solving challenging cases at state-of-the-art level. We can talk about it a bit more later. Again, other things here, AI outperform physician as an expert case discussion on challenging cases. Here it was O3. Google chatbot match primary care physician on multi-visit disease management. Collaborative AI improved clinician diagnostic accuracy by 10%. So physicians were able to use GPT-4, again, even more, much older, to get a second opinion, and that reduced errors in there. AI consult led to a reduction of clinical error in urgent care. The use of AI in consult reduced by 16% diagnosis error and 13% relative reduction in treatment error. And those keep going. Again, for the amount of time, I'll end that. But I think that one actually pretty interesting, where people, when it's over text, when it's over email, people tend to prefer the AI than the doctors or the nurses. They're nicer. They slept. They haven't been on call for 48 hours, right? So that's often giving a much better result there. OpenAI also developed HealthBench that they started early on to develop with physician. I think now they have it partially automated. Again, some of you that follow those models that realize that now we're at Opus 4.6, that we're at GPT 5.2, 5.3, I think 5.4 is coming for coding this week. Current studies that we have are older, on older models, where performance, if we look at other sectors, are nowhere close to the capability of the model now. All that we have really in comparison are the internal studies from OpenAI, from Anthropic. This one is called GPT-Val, and what they do is that they have expert in a lot of domains, write case studies, and then they have humans go through the case, and they have the AI go through the case, and they have other expert humans review the output to see which one they prefer, which one they felt were equivalent. And since the release of Opus 4.5 in November, we're starting to see for nurses, for lawyers, for RNs, that the human expert starting to prefer GPT 5.2, Opus 4.5, and again, now we're having better models. So technically, if this is tracking, we should have studies now where, for the most part in healthcare, it's better than what the doctor did, right? So what does that mean here? What are the challenges that this is creating? Well, those are not new, despite AI having new capabilities. Here, this article from 1970. I assume most of you were not alive when this was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, saying that, oh, now a computer might be able to assess doctor, might be able to help doctors, might be able to get some automated care here because of computers, right? Very, very similar discussion as the one we're having right now. What are some of the questions that are raised by AI in healthcare? Is it safe? Is it effective? What is safe? What is effective? For which population? Who should use them? Like, should we be able to use the OpenAI one, or should only be doctor using things like open evidence or things that are built for them, where they can ask the right question and make sure they give the right diagnosis, right? What about physician autonomy, right? Like, are we just going to the AI now? Who's responsible if something goes wrong, right? Can we sue OpenAI? Do I sue the doctor? What if he tells the AI, right? So there's a lot of questions coming up from all of that. And people are using these, right? As we were saying earlier, there's this investigation from The Guardian here saying that people are getting a lot of inaccurate information, written summaries when they Google things. Well, the engineer that are here are going to understand it, like, of course, because when you go on google.com, you need a snappy answer. So it's a super small model. It's not a thinking model any kind of way. You get a response right away because it's not a model that is made for anything like giving you a healthcare response, right? Coming back to the CMA survey here that was published a couple of weeks ago, only 27% of the Canadians said that they trusted AI for accurate healthcare and health information. If I ask you, raise your hand if you trust AI for health information, healthcare. It's like, yeah. ish. There's like 3, 4 people. Um, I'd argue that I trust AI more than my family doctor, but that's a different thing, personally. Um, in their survey, they had people that said that like they were 5 times more likely to experience harm if they followed AI than if they did not, right? Which is pretty damn high. I'm not gonna touch on that a lot today, but of course we see all kind of issue with mental health, right? People are using AI to replace therapists, to be a companion, right? To be their boyfriend or their girlfriend. Like if you ever have like time to waste, to be like shocked, go on like Reddit and look what those people say about like their AI boyfriend. It's troubling, right? And there's like very little like enforcement on any of that, right? We saw like a tragedy happen in DC like a few weeks ago, right? And like we see people like going and like having psychosis and those things. For those of you that are interested, that we have a Mario who's running the center here that has given a talk a few weeks ago on that. It's very very good. It's like specifically on those. And we also see a pretty big discrepancy in the studies when AI is doing the case by itself and when humans are using it, right? That's the OpenAI strategy. That's the ChatGPT. That's me going there and telling what my symptoms are, what my issues are. Well, of course, people forget things, right? People forget to add information, things that are relevant, and then you see a giant discrepancy between the performance of AI alone on benchmark and the performance of people using it, right? What they use for that study, again, a bit older, but it was GPT 4.0 that they use. And as I was saying, people fail to enter critical symptoms or severity, for example, of a stiff neck. As I mentioned earlier, people end up having harms according to the studies, right? 10 to 20% of the harms like you see again mental health issues with that, and the scale is pretty high from studies and surveys. Like 76% of the GPs are already using LLM in clinical decision making. Um, we only have one case in Ontario of issues around that. We had a doctor at I don't think the hospital was named, but who used an AI scribe called Otter.ai, and you would send that in, on the Zoom that they had and everything, and then he left the hospital, and for weeks the AI kept showing up. The AI kept sending notes about all kind of patients having all kind of issues, having all kind of PHI, right? It is highly problematic and is not really a good way of ensuring that like we can police that, right? People now have access to those tools without the hospital, right? ChatGPT is $20 a month. Like Claude is $20 a month, right? And people have that perception that AI is helping them so much, but when we look at AI scribes, like 86.5% of the physicians like thought that they were saving a lot of time, but then when they were looking at people on aggregate, it was 30 seconds that they were saving. Like from the study, like it seemed that like a few people were getting most of the gains, while other people had to review, they had to learn a new software. Like there's all kind of like things in there, right? So we see it like on the surface, like AI is doing great at benchmark. It's amazing. It's better than like the doctors in many of those. But then when you look at practice, right, there's all those like practical failure, those hallucination. It's taking shortcut. It's not doing great on safety. You can see when we look at like factual retrieval or doing med school exam, it's doing amazingly well. But then when we look at clinical reasoning or safety assessment, it is much lower. We see that all across the studies, whenever it's deployed, whenever it's put to the test in a real clinical um, setup, it is not doing as good. Some of those. So 2 days ago, Nature Medicine accelerated the publication of a study on ChatGPT Health. So it's like, all right, at I think they went Mount Sinai in New York. So let's put that ChatGPT Health test to the test. Um, It is the first independent safety evaluation since it was launched in January 2026. And what they did is that they gave cases here, and they were asking the AI, do you want to escalate it, or do you want to put it as like not too much of a big deal? So the findings that they had in there is that it was very inconsistent. Uh, it had a very hard time when people were talking about having self-harm plans, when people were not necessarily being super clear about the issue they had. It was doing great for stroke, anaphylactic shock, or things that were in textbook around allergies, but it was not doing great whenever people were having a discussion about some of the issues that they were going through. And very often, especially in the times where those were edge cases, would very often choose a lower urgency level. Some of the other issues we have. So people like overtrust low accuracy AI generated medical advice. Even with GPT-3, people would trust what the AI would say. It sounds good, right? If you're not a doctor, if you're not a nurse, it's telling you stuff that sounds intelligible, sounds likely, right? As a lawyer, I use it for law, and it like sometimes it sounds great. It's like it's amazing. You see lawyers getting caught with like fake cases, hallucination, getting disbarred all the time, right? Because it sounds good, and they didn't review anything, right? So, and it's not just like normal people, like doctors are also exhibiting automation bias, right? It's like, oh, like it makes sense, like the AI might be right, right? Or sometimes it's the opposite. You have people that like don't want to agree with the AI, and the AI is right, right? And now you have a misdiagnosis because of that, and patient are suffering. So, how we collaborate with AI is just very challenging here. Like we don't really have a good way of like knowing when it's right, when it's wrong, unless we're doing their verification. A lot of those are black boxes, so you don't necessarily know how it got to that conclusion, right? Uh, a lot of studies again on harm and here in clinical safety. I'll speed run to some of those here. So one of the most interesting study is that one where they changed the answer that was right to like so none of the other answer, and that really reduced the performance of the LLM. And the reason for that is that a lot of it is like pattern recognition, right? It memorize what's in the textbook, and memorize what you read online. So like then when you give them those cases and you change a little thing, it's not going to necessarily be able to catch it, right? Some more evidence of harms in so since 2021, when there's 1,401 adverse event report linked to AI device in the US. Currently, the way that our monitoring system works in Canada and in the US, it's complaint driven. Health Canada or FDA license for sale, approve something, they put it in the market, whether it's a drug or something, and then something wrong happen and keep happening, that people complaining, and now they investigate, right? So it's not really possible for them to catch it upstream or when it starts to happen. You need to have a critical mass of patient having adverse event or issues happening before they start to do something. Of course, when we look at AI, well, if the AI start misbehaving, can be millions of people get hurt, right? Like tens of millions of people that end up having issues because of a drift or something along those lines. Now we're reached the summit. We are actually back into what is the Trump government doing about any of this. There's not much happening here, honestly. So we'll have to talk about RFK, which through the HHS, they have announced in December a request for information to harness AI to deflate healthcare costs, make America healthy again, and also to align all the agencies to have one policy for AI. So you see like some of the questions that were asked up there. We don't really, again, have answers on that, but they earlier put a very similar one for the FDA. So that one, if I recall correctly, was in September. They had 119 comments from companies, people, Signal One here in Toronto. None of the labs submitted anything. There's one comment mentioning OpenAI. Same person mentioned Anthropic. No XAI. Google only published comments through its very lead division. So very, very big miss in there. What we see when we look at the comments, we seem to have a view that the current system that we have, which is complaint driven, cannot work for AI. Having studies that we submit and having closed model that are put in hospital, in healthcare, also is not possible. That like we went from experimental to now something like people using every day, um, and that we need to have alignment to fix that regulatory gray zone that we are into. The Mayo Clinic here suggested to move from those static benchmark to continuous lifecycle monitoring, called RWP, Real World Performance Monitoring, and that this is foundational to AI and regulating AI. A lot of the people providing comments and a lot of companies in that space view this as the way we need to regulate AI. We need to have something in real time. We need to adopt RWPM. We need to make sure that like we're constantly monitoring for drift, for performance issues, to make sure that like people are informed of the risk, that there is transparency, that we are defining the liability, who is responsible for what, if we have human in the loops, what is their role in there, that we have to move and have governance structure that can handle the reality of autonomous AI. Can we get insurance against AI error like Doctronics for OpenAI, for Claude, for any of those? And of course, training the clinician to make sure that they are able to detect automation bias, as the humans are often the final safety net here. Again, mandatory RWPM, transparency, and modernizing reimbursement, right? Currently, like, you get paid when you treat someone who's sick. You don't really get paid in the US, and very, very similar in Canada, to like, oh, just make sure people are okay, right? So a lot of people are providing comments like, you need to have billing code for that. You need to get money for the AI, making sure people go to the gym, people take their meds, people that for the AI to be able to just remind people about those issues, right? Uh, and how are we going to be operationalizing all of that? Do we build dashboard? What is safety? What is acceptable? What is dangerous? What gets elevated? Should we design for human in the loops there with a confidence incident and then escalating to human review if not? Um, should we have patient transparency there? I argue people should know if it's an AI was involved, right? Patients should know if you have an AI scribe while you're there. Like all of those things like should be disclosed, right? However, when we think about like human in the loop, like especially for those of you coding, right? The illusion of having physician, being able to catch all of that, being able to understand what the AI is doing, especially at the scale of those agents working and ingesting information, going through data, like it's not possible, right? We also don't train them for that. We train them to provide care to patient. We train them to like do surgery. We don't train them so that they can like catch like algorithmic errors in a black box that like they don't have access to like every single thing or every prompt or anything that was done in the back end of like the providers, right? So you don't really like know as a doctor here. And like what do we do about like equity, right? And bias mitigation, right? Like do we have representative data, right? Can we take like those like fancy like AI things from Toronto and send it at in one of the indigenous like reserves to like help people there? Well, how much data do they have about indigenous? Probably very little, right? Can we take that and like give it for people like in like Africa, right? They probably have a lot of white people in their data set, right? Like you need to do testing. They need to like show what the data that they have and need to have like public reporting of that data so that like people can like be informed. Like you wouldn't necessarily know. It's like, oh, the doctor said the AI was good and whatnot, but like then you're excluded of that data set. How are you gonna know? Like you're just gonna know. Um, again, what a lot of companies, a lot of people are suggesting is to have that real world performance and to assess through the life cycle and monitoring and having triggers and then intervening and then updating as issues happen and as models get better. Some of the other suggestions that people have, of course, to look at making sure that like the claims are actually correct, the citation are accurate, what are the hallucination rate. When we look at Doctronics, again, it was 0.8 according to them. Did the state of Utah test that? Who knows? And again, toxicity and PHI leak. If you don't allow those tools to be used by your doctors, by your nurses, they use it on their phone. They use it on their personal computer. They use it at home, and you are missing all of that information. And it is not, even if they were to use their work computer right now, the hospital, the clinics do not have a way of assessing and like looking, all right, let's go see like what the doctor said, what they put in there. Oh, there was like some PHI in there, right? It's all self-policing in a lot of ways. So those are some of the issues when we're looking about governing of generative AI and governing of AI in healthcare. And I'd love to hear everyone and your thoughts. I did see that a few of you cared a lot about mental health, which I barely talked about today. And there's a great talk tomorrow. Not a shit at all, but like there's a great talk from a doctor at UFT. So if you scan that, you'll get the Zoom for tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Pascal. So just raise your hand if you have a question. We're packed in a little tight, so I'd appreciate your help in passing the mic over heads. Yeah, does anybody have any questions?
I can start off. Thanks, Pascal, for the sharing. And my question is around the governance piece, because I'm working on the product side with my teams, and so far, the way that we've designed products is that it's mostly like, the AI goes first, like, digest all the data, and then comes with the output, and then the human is like the final safety net, like you shared earlier. But now it seems that, as you presented, maybe another way to think about it is that the human is the one that starts off with this workflow, and the AI is the last part to catch the errors. I don't know. I'm just wondering, like, your take on whether you think it's more effective or whether it's better for governance if it's the human that catches the AI's errors, or whether it's the AI that catches the human's errors.
I think it's better if it's the AI, right? Those of you here who code, like, you're probably like running like an AI after you're done coding to like review your code, and it's catching issues and bugs and whatnot. Like I know what I do. Like if I coded it with like Codex, I'm gonna have Opus like a sub agent just go with a brand new context window and like review it, and like most of the time it's finding bugs and issues. Even if I did it myself, even if like I had like the best AI model like do it, it's finding issues. So I think in healthcare, like you're gonna have AI policing the AI, right, to see if you have a misdiagnosis there. And the problem with having human review everything is that it's not scalable, right? When we look at healthcare here, people cannot access it. Same thing in the U.S., right? But you have to pay. But here, it's very dire, the state of the healthcare system in Canada. AI is allowing you to scale it, right? So finding a way that like you can have the AI review the output of the AI is a way where we get more healthcare for people, cheaper, yeah, I think that's how I think it's gonna be. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for your take.
Sorry, can I get you to speak?
Yeah.
So when you're talking about there was paper studying how AI healthcare works since January this year, and they
Yep.
found some mistakes and errors on edge cases. But I wonder if that was compared with the human errors in similar cases, because when you say that they make mistake, we do make mistakes, as well,
100%.
right? So I wonder what would be comparison.
I think a rule of thumb is that like the stat like across the board is that 10% of people that like deal with like a physician or hospital or whatnot have an adverse event. So
Yes.
anything higher than
Yes.
10%, like the person was worse off using the AI. But again, the AI, the mistake that like an AI will make end up being very different than the mistake that like a human will make, right? So like there's no gradation here, like
Right.
in the error when you look at that 10%.
So it should be depending on what kind of errors they are making.
I mean, an error where the patient dies is much worse than an error where like
Right.
where they
Yeah.
told you to go home. Well, oh, they should have like told give you Tylenol, right? So a gradation of error is pretty crucial.
So we assume in the kind of the trials, diagnosis wouldn't be happening to human as much as they did.
So I'm not sure I get your
So
question.
that we assume that their mistakes in the making trials, this decision making error is not kind of something we usually see from the human errors.
I think to get into the weeds there, I'll maybe give you the link of the study. So if you
Sure.
want to read it, I'd be happy to share it.
Thanks so much for the talk, Pascal. I just wanted to ask, what do you anticipate the future of healthcare and AI would look like?
How bad do I want to talk about government? It's all in their hands, right? So if you look at Canada, like we are just like very risk averse on like everything, right? Like technology, business, like most of you would know like AI was basically invented here, right? What we see as AI now. So when I see like the Trump government for like all of their wrong, like at least they're trying something. Is that gonna like yield result? Who knows, right? But like they are trying to like maybe adjust like the rules for that new AI in healthcare world. Is it the first time we're hearing that? No. It's like the first people, no, right? But TBD. So I think it's very, very hard because it's really just going to depend on government. When we look at like what ChatGPT allow, right? Like there's a lot of bad outcome from people going direct, right? It's not great that like we have access to all of that data. I mean, I have a Oura Ring, I love it. I think it's great. But like I would much prefer that was connected to my EMR and my doctor could have access to all of that data as well, right? So it's gonna depend for sure.
Thank you.
Thanks for the super interesting talk. How do you think health technology assessment practices need to change, given kind of everything that you've laid out here? Recognizing that real world evidence is going to be a part of the solution, but how did the actual health technology assessment practices need to change, in your opinion?
Well, first, requiring to have a closed model is not going to work for any of that, right? Normally, you'd build your model, and then you do a clinical study, and like then you like submit all of that to the FDA or Health Canada. Like that model doesn't work in the world that we have now, right? So like this is a giant change here that needs to happen. So you need to have some kind of like level of like safety, like comfortability that like you need to reach for the regulator to maybe like allow you to like try it in on different sites. It's really need to change in all kind of ways. What do you think?
I don't really have strong opinions. I know that there's an expert in health technology assessment in the room, but maybe they'll offer opinion.
Eugene's question. I'm curious about, you mentioned insurance being mandatory. I think that was for the prescribing situation scenario.
In Utah, yeah.
So two questions, pick one of them. The first question is, how exactly are those insurance companies evaluating, or are they? Are they effectively relying on RWP as you're mentioning? And second of all, what are your thoughts on insurance, mandatory insurance as a mechanism in the healthcare space of regulating AI technologies?
I mean, your first question is easy. Like that happened a month ago, so we don't know, right? So there's like no data on it. I would assume that if someone has an adverse event, they're gonna look at it like the way they look at it for a doctor. They look like what a doctor in the same like area would prescribe, and if it's the same, you don't really have a claim, and it's different. Well, the insurance probably jump in some capacity. I think it'd be great if like we are able to build like a bunch of insurance companies that are willing to insure that risk. But as you're like saying, like how they calculate that, right? How much are they charging them? What are they insuring? Like in what cases, right? Those are super, and I don't think that anyone has very, very good data now for to go out there and decide as an insurance company, sure, I'm going to insure OpenAI for like $10 billion if like something goes wrong with like them providing like quasi medical advice. I'm shocked that like Doctronics was able to get insurance, like on a like medical liability insurance. When I heard that, I was like, well, A, it's great for the patient if they cover claims, right? But yeah.
Thanks, Pascal, for this amazing presentation. My question is more on the liability aspect of AI. We know that for sure AI is going to mess up big time, especially in healthcare. There are lives at stake. So, when it comes to liability, what do you think? Should there be a shared responsibility framework, or should there be a mechanism to identify who's really legally responsible for the outcome? So whether that is developer, health system, or the physician who's attending the patient. So how do we actually identify who's responsible there? Because now it's getting trickier and trickier, and AI is actually getting really hard to spot where actually things went wrong.
I think we should blame the doctors for everything, and they should be liable for every single thing that AI does if they touch it. I have a couple of doctor friends watching online, so actually I get a very, very angry text message from them. I mean, that's a hard question, right? Like
It is.
It's. I think it depends on like the level of automation. It depends. Like I like to have the principle for liability, which is follow the money, right? Who's making money from
Follow the money.
that thing happening, right? So who's aggregating
So
like a lot of like value from that services to be provided? And I bet it might be like the AI labs a lot, right? Because as I had earlier, like they're going into like legal, healthcare, finance, all of those verticals. So that would make sense.
So in the last month, there was a research done on ChatGPT Health. I think about 1,000 patients were studied upon, and the outcome was about 52% of the life-threatening criticalities where ChatGPT failed to advise that the emergencies are required. So in those cases, like since you're saying go where the money is going, so blame ChatGPT in this case.
I mean, this was a study, right? So they had people like review.
Yeah, they actually had
review it and make sure and
Yeah.
everything. But that's also why like those things are like not like out like in the wild, right? Like making clinical decision already. But
Mhm.
like you can go and like make a decision like with your discussion with ChatGPT. But like, oh, I'm not gonna go to hospital, right, and have a bad outcome from it. But like they don't tell you that like they're like a doctor or any of that. But people are making like those calls every day from
Mhm.
asking a chatbot. Right?
No, this is a research which is published also on the Nature, I believe the same Nature Medicine. So yeah.
It's one the one we had earlier. On
Yeah,
the
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I think Jake, you had a
Yeah.
question as well.
Thanks.
Please be mean, Jake.
No. Thank you so much. I mean, there are not many lawyers who work in this space, and it's every time I hear you present, I'm always learning something new, and I just like thanks for the presentation. My question was more around intellectual property, specifically patents. Like the medical industry in this part of the world is heavily driven by patents, technology, and more like a capitalist structure. And we see how things like, COVID-19 with the massive amounts of people who died. I think about 23% people were not because they lacked vaccines, or because there was IP protection around specific companies who had leverage to produce and distribute these vaccines. And I'm thinking, what do you think about? I see the promising value of like ChatGPT Health and the rest of that, but with the way technology has worked, it would fail sometimes. It would prioritize patients, obviously. I'm sure people would pay more and it would give them that, you know. And I see cases with Optum AI in the US where, you know, like a lot of black patients were de escalated because black people don't spend as much. So I'm wondering, do we need to restructure? Is there any aspect you think we need to restructure? Would it be our IP system? Would it be our data collection system? Because you mentioned like PHI. We currently in Canada don't collect indigenous data or like data from like on race, for example, and we know how that is critical for specific populations. Where would you think, from a legal perspective, what needs to change for health AI to really advance? Would it be our IP laws need to change? Would it be our data law need to change? Would it be maybe the insurance law? Do we need to de-insure health systems? I'm just curious to know what you think.
Well, we don't need to like collect like patient like racial data because we don't make that data available anyway. So even if we had it, no one could have access to it, right? As you know very well. But like those are problems, right? Like those are issues. Like, well, like a lot of data is not collected for all kind of reasons, and even the data that is collected is not made available for researchers, right? To like be able to like develop things and improve care and making sure that like people who look like me, people who look like you, people who look like all kind of like different others, right? Like can receive good care if AI or technological tools are used on them, right? And for some of the point you made, I think need to be part of the rules, right? Like if you need to look for the AI drift, you need to look for the AI to take like some things into account, like the color of the skin and deprioritize them because in its data set, the AI has that like those people spend less money on healthcare and like then they discriminate like those. I had like one slide on like some of those things, right? Like being like covered, like outside of like making sure that like the models work well and that like we like audit that, we need to audit all the things you're talking about as well. That like making sure that this is like done properly, especially in a place like Toronto where everyone is coming from all kind of different places, right? Where you have very, very like heterogeneous population.
Sorry, not to hold the mic. I just keep thinking about I have an accident and I'm like, oh my God, ChatGPT, what's going on? And it goes, you've exhausted your prompts for today. Pay $50 more. Like, it's a business, and I'm just wondering if regulation can intervene in that area. But yeah, thank you very much.
As Jake is talking, I'm thinking about like a Black Mirror episode that we watched where like the subscription model just becomes more and more expensive and you do have to sign on to the next model to get
That's
the
a great
benefits.
episode. Yeah.
I think I'm the HA expert that Eugene alluded to. Happy to talk about in the regulatory setting as well as the health technology assessment setting, the mechanisms that do exist in place to sort of monitor after post-market or pre-market approval and then real-life sort of implementation mechanisms, but are they actually being used or are they good enough? I think that's the question. As you talk about sort of what's going on, I can't help but think about what happened to direct-to-consumer genetic testing. 23andMe, for example. Initially, when 23andMe started selling products for genetic testing, it was sort of curiosity-driven types of results that they would share. But soon they got into the medical area, and that caught the eye of the FDA, and then that came under regulation. How likely is it that that would happen with GPT Health or these other sort of AI tools as they're getting more and more into that medical sort of or healthcare arena? Or do you see sort of the economic power of AI and government's interest in adopting commercialization as opposed to ensuring safety still kind of trumping that interest in regulation?
Great question. I think unlikely under Trump, right, to have any of that. For those of you who follow the Department of War issues over the weekend, they just want that to be everywhere, right? Having said that, the things you're bringing up, I think this is like part of all the things Anthropic is thinking about, right? That like they don't do like Anthropic for health, we're pushing it to consumer and having people like use Claude to like ask all kind of questions and whatnot and everything. Like they don't want to go there because they see the long term and they want to position themselves in a place where we'll work with like medical practices, we'll work with like insurance company, we'll work with like administrator, right, to like build things and like get it like approved or whatnot, right? While OpenAI, they really like speed running like the Oura Ring strategy, the Fitbit strategy. Let's go DDC. Let's say it's not medical advice, It's not medical advice or it's not legal advice, but you can go ChatGPT get like the equivalent of legal advice. At the end of the day, like that doesn't change much for the user in all kind of ways. What is the outcome of that? I mean, as we saw, sometimes very bad, right? Sometimes good, and people go there because they find it useful, right? And that's a big difference and now than like 5 years ago. Like before, none of that was really useful. Like now it is.
Fantastic talk. Thank you. The Canada Health Act has portability and universality as key pillars. So on that basis, we share one big national risk pool. We're all in it together because we're able to flee to a different. I understand that there's opinions in certain provinces who will not be named that may have strong opinions about the Canada Health Act. However, they're still on they still receive points, so they have to abide by that law.
Do they?
There's an emergent understanding about who gets special, who's more special than others.
I think there's a non-emerging understanding that you don't have to respect the Canada Health Act in any kind of way, and nothing is going to happen to you.
Possibly. So if we are arguably in it together as the same risk pool, and an LLM in effect contains loads of potential treatments and is a bundle of risk, wondering about your perspective of should there be a public alternative to be able to bundle and manage that risk, so at least there's an arena to decide who's bearing which harms, who's going to be exposed to which harms. At least it can be monitored as part of a centralized risk pool. Thanks.
Thank you. So I disagree with your premise, but I'll get back to that. Are you saying, can you give him the mic back for a sec? Are you saying that like you'd want to have like at the Canadian scale some kind of like insurance company or some kind of like understanding of like what is needed to be there, so it's like everyone like maybe get the same safety level in every province or something like that?
I understand that there's the ideal of the Canadian Health Act, which is and still I understand that like the we've had history with it, and that's Canada. We talk ourselves into existence, and then we talk about the talking and talking about the talking. Welcome to a policy discussion. So if we are in it together, all together, and I understand the bits, I'm not necessarily proposing a public institution, but given the alternatives, the Americans, they don't share, they're not in it together, right? They don't share the same risk pool. They seem to have quite vicious fights with each other over, I'm in a superior pool than you are. So in Canada, at least, no, in theory, we're all within the same pool. So could there be a role for a public entity? And if so, where would it logically sit, given the tortured nature of that Canada Health Act? How sticky it is?
I mean, sure, and that's Health Canada, right? They just need funding and like they need to like develop expertise and hire expert and whatnot, and like to be able to like make those decisions and like take some risk. And like now with the sandbox environment, I was like literally just announced, right, like a couple of weeks ago. Maybe they'll allow some of those things like the Doctronics Utah thing, right? But again, to go back on your premise, like the delivery of healthcare is provincial. People often think that healthcare is provincial, but as you know, it is not, right? but delivery of healthcare. So you get very different healthcare system depending on the provinces that like you go to, and you have a competition to get doctors, to get nurses, right? Like Quebec was fighting with their doctor, like Doc was saying, like, here's my cell phone number, call me, you can move to Ontario. A lot of a family doctor here moved to BC because like they had a better pay there or whatnot. Like I moved here 10 years ago to law school, and I was shocked that you guys could get a family doctor. It's not a thing in Quebec. No one can get a family doctor. It's like every time I would go, like they say, "Oh, do you want a family doctor?" I was like, "What is this world where they have family doctor here in Ontario?" Right? So you get like, sure, we're all in it together, but you get very different healthcare system. And the problem with the Canada Health Act is the same problem with a lot of things in this country. We don't enforce it, right? We don't enforce it on Alberta. We don't enforce it in Ontario. Just like I think 2 days ago, the Minister of Health federally said like now Ontario needs to have billing code for nurse practitioner, right? Like people have been talking about that for years. I have one of my ex-student who might be listening that his wife is an MP who was thinking of starting a business with her, like privately charging patient, because a lot of people have been doing that for many years now, right? So sure, technically we have all those principles of those great things and like we're all in it together, we're all the same rules, but if there's no enforcement, is there any rules, right?
Thank you, Pascal, for the talk. I'd love the recency of the slides, like Jan 2026 and all that. Is there a space in Canada for regulatory sciences to sort of develop? Because this is, perpendicular to what companies would be looking at. Like, nobody's gonna look at shortcuts or confounders or bias in AI models when they're building it. So it has to be coming from the other side. Like, a government system might need to push it. So in that range, like, things would hit the fan in 5 years. Because like I've been spending the last 4 years doing a PhD in it, and I'm scared about AI in any form of healthcare. So it's like, how do we go from here in terms of developing that regulatory skill set, or like where do we plug this in? Who's gonna pay for it? Is the main question. Like, do you see something happening, or are we just never gonna catch up? Like, what's your general sense of the situation?
I think again, as I was saying earlier, the problem is the willingness of like going and trying things, right? We're not early adopters of like any of those things here. And if you want to work in there, there's kind of like three choices. You can be an academic and write papers and whatnot, and that will allow you to like interact a little bit with industry, a little bit with government in some ways, or you can go work in government, right? We need like smart people with PhD in government so that understand those things and are capable. Or you can go to industry, right, where everything is about the dollar. And like I work in industry quite a lot, and it's like a lot of the times you're repurposing U.S. things. Even if you're Canadian healthcare tech company, you probably go to the U.S. first. Market is bigger, it's easier. Like so, Canada is often an afterthought in some of that. So sometimes they have consultation that are published. Where you can get to like give your opinion, like the one I was showing for the FDA, right? Those can be useful, but like not to like keep dunking on Health Canada, but like I know a few. They're super smart, they're super capable, but they're like a small pocket of people with no money, right? And they have to try to like make sense of all of that, especially after having collaborated with the UK and the US for many years, and now the US going in a totally different direction and removing all of those things. It's not an easy place to be, right?
Like post the, like, I assume that once the Trump era is over, like things are gonna, like they gutted the FDA regulatory.
You're assuming he's not going to run again?
Let's see. Like, but do you see this pivot back? Because like for government, like right now we're in the Wild West side of things. Like, but would the next presidency or so see a pivot back to maybe more regulation, or then would it be more like, would there be a space for doing this, like doing the right thing?
I mean, I wouldn't say that like they're not trying to do the right thing, right? Like again, we don't know what they're gonna be like doing in the end. I think the system we have now is not adapted to AI in any kind of way, just preventing innovation. And the people want to have AI. People want to be able to go on ChatGPT and ask about their health They want to be able to receive care. They want it to be cheaper. There's ways to do that as AI models get better, right? Um, and it's gonna depend who's the next. Like, if it's GD Vance, probably gonna be like similar approach. If it's like, right, so it's hard. Like, it's very polarizing, of course, in the U.S., as I'm sure you know. But again, companies like Anthropic are betting that like things will come back to like normalcy in some way, and that there's gonna be like processes that are similar to the one we had before to apply. At least this is my reading from what they're doing.
Hi, thanks for the talk. A lot of AI tools used in healthcare are developed from data sets used from multiple countries. That raises a lot of concern. And also, each country has a different healthcare system. So, from a governance perspective, how should these tools be used so that they are integrated, integrated domestically?
Um, it's a little bit similar to what we are talking about with Jake earlier. I think you need to have transparency about what is in the data, right? I think when they are submitting and whatever is going to be the framework eventually, well, you should submit like your racial data, your gender data, your like all of those things, right? So it's like people who end up using those tools or people who end up being treated by those can make an informed decision. And I was like, all right, this has been used with like this data set, that data set, right? If they're not going to be doing that, it's kind of hard, right? You're going to get what you're going to get. And again, we're going to go back to something happened and people are getting injured and like now we need to remove it or from the market or something like that. So it's, yeah. Yeah, there's this guy in the back who's been asking for a while. No, it's fine. It's fine. You're doing great, Georgia.
Thank you.
Thanks. And so my question kind of builds on what you just responded to and a few other questions here. So with a lot of the AI services that we currently have essentially been built on scraped public data, right? And when we're talking about coverage, making sure healthcare works well for people of color, minorities, indigenous people, I'm always wondering, is there more of a need to kind of push for more public data sets in where it's the government's responsibility to make sure that there is enough coverage and data for all communities? Because left to individual businesses, only really big companies could afford to actually go collect all this information, and it stops innovation from smaller players. And B, it effectively works on, well, which community is going to make me money, right? So once the data set's actually available to them, most businesses shouldn't have a reason to say that this is why our AI doesn't work well for certain communities and why it works better for others. So almost from a liability and also regulatory perspective, is this something we need to be pushing more for?
If there's any health researcher here in the room, like they tell you that like they cannot have access to any data, right? So like beyond like the government like having a responsibility and everything, making it accessible for people who want to do research and use it and try to develop things is just very, very hard in this country. I agree a lot of things you're saying. Like, that'd be great if we were doing that. That'd be great if like the data was collecting all kind of things, right? As like Jake was saying earlier, because like if you don't collect racial data, how can you report on that as a company, right? Or just know that like yourself, if you're part of those, that this was trained on like someone who looks like you. That'd be like, speak to your MP, like push on the government, like every single health AI researcher, that's the biggest complaint. That's the one. There's one called Anna Goldenberg here at UFT. She talks about that all the time, every single day, nonstop. She cannot have access to data. We lost researcher here that like went to MIT and other places because they could not have access to data in healthcare. It is just like super, super hard. So I agree with your suggestion.
It might be a bit out of the scope of this talk, but I think there is a place in the world where actually AI for healthcare is widely deployed at scale for several years. I'm thinking of China. So there's a company called Ping An Insurance, which many years ago spun out to Ping An Good Doctor. And I'm wondering if it's a long shot, but if you have any kind of knowledge about how that's done there, and if there are any lessons to be learned from that rollout.
There's no way that I know more than you, so on that specific subject. So it's like, no, but I'd love to hear about it. Like if you have like any like a 1 minute, like no, you don't. I've never heard of them. To answer your question.
Yeah, Ping An Insurance is one of these giant like conglomerate companies. They have many different businesses. I can't remember how many years ago it was, but they started offering different types of AI models, mostly convolutional neural networks for diagnostic image analysis. They've been widely deployed in China for several years now. I don't know what the regulatory framework looks like there. I don't know what kind of evaluations they performed internally. I don't know what kind of third-party evaluations there have been. So I don't really have that much insight. But I was just thinking for our discussion, like when policymakers, before they say, hey, we're going to do X, typically they do a jurisdiction scan. So I was thinking, that'd be a good place to look at.
Sure, I'd love to learn about them. You just sign up to translate document in Mandarin for me. So congrats.
Thank you, Pascal. You have law background, right? So I was wondering if, what if we have access to specialized data, such as the one Thomas Reuters provides to law, right? And then we're able to make more decisions based on those kind of specialized data in healthcare. Will that help us resolve some of the issues Jake raised, and also the other lady and the other individual there about data biasness and all that?
I think the answer is like more data is always better than less data, right? So if you have like more specialized data for like some kind of like use case, you can like potentially like develop things in there a bit more, right? But again, like data in of itself is very hard to access in Canada, as I keep saying, and like specialized data like even more. But there's all kind of things to do with AI in healthcare, right? Like someone was mentioning, it was like, oh, like doctor make mistakes. Like I have a good friend that is neurosurgeon. I remember before COVID, he hadn't slept for 48 hours. He had just came back from doing brain surgery, and he came with us to go see the Blue Jays. And I was like, why are you even here? It's like go home, like go sleep, right? And it's like I would never want to have brain surgery, any kind of surgery, from someone who hadn't slept in 2 days, right? But that's the healthcare system we have now, right? Like if you guys like know nurses, like doctors, like they don't sleep, they work all the time, they're tired, right? Like so again, having like specialized data or all kind of data that can like help them and reduce the burden, like pretty big gift and like pretty like necessary, especially in a country where we keep having more and more people, right? That means we need to find ways to deliver more care. So it's either we train a ton of nurses and we pay them enough so they don't go to the US or in other provinces. Same with doctors. Or we find other ways with AI that we can provide some care, maybe the way they do in China and other places, right?
Yeah, so I think probably my question would be, do we have those kind of specialized data, such as the subscription model created for lawyers by Thomas Reuters for doctors and nurses and professionals like that now? Do we have any of such available for that?
I mean, whenever you go to the hospital, right, they collect data on you. But like whenever you go, if you have a family doctor, they connect data there, right? If you move to Alberta, like they connect data like on you as well, right? The problem here, which is a problem in many places, like it's super fragmented. So sure, there's all kind of like health data, and some of the things we're not even capturing, right? But it's in a bunch of like different pockets of places. Some that are in paper form, so right. So not super accessible for research, but yeah, thank you. I think it's 8:15. We can probably end it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Georgia.
So I'm just going to pitch you all what's going on in the next 2 weeks. In policy, we have Christy Logue is presenting on how do different countries and jurisdictions regulate open source models. So mostly China, US, EU, but also kind of the UK and I guess Canada, because we're here. And then also in policy, we have extrajudicial enforcement of the EU AI Act. And then our technical talks are on how do we align brain like AGI. So let's say in 20 years, AGI looks like a human brain. What are the potential alignment problems that we'll run into? And then we also have a talk that will be this Thursday on the technical side for network infrastructure overview and the implications that it has for governance. So it'll be kind of technical, kind of governance. Thank you again so much, Pascal, and thank you all for coming. I hope you come again. Yeah. Feel free to stay for the next little bit until I leave. So just, I don't know, 9:30, 9:45 we'll be here, so just hang out.